Welcome to Hoovie's Garage, the dumbest automotive channel in all of YouTube. And I've said a lot of absurd things over the years on this YouTube channel, but this is definitely up there. I have two old Bentleys, and one of them is my winter Bentley, my outside Bentley, and the other one is my summer or my indoor Bentley. Both are old, both are needy, and both are complete disasters to own. You should never, ever buy one of these things, and yet I've owned one for a year. I'm celebrating my anniversary with my 1991 Bentley Turbo R, though I imagine celebrating this anniversary is kind of like Johnny Depp celebrating his anniversaries with Amber Heard. It's been a horrible relationship over this past year, and while the Azure hasn't been quite as bad, it's given the previous owners way more heartburn than the Turbo R. That being said, between the two cars, there is over $100,000 in repairs over the last 10 years, which is absolutely insane. It tells you one of three things for people that own these cars. Either one, they are very, very old money and they don't care. Number two, they're YouTubers that love to complain about how much cars cost and make a living that way. Or number three, an old Bentley owner is just absolutely, completely insane. Most of them fall into that category, in my opinion, and today I'll try to explain it as well as try to find some kind of silver lining into owning these cars. Maybe I'll find something. I don't know. So just a little recap. When the Turbo R was introduced, Bentley was in a very, very bad way. At the time, Bentley and Rolls-Royce were part of the same company. They had changed hands and ownership several times, and the cars had not been updated in decades. Really, there wasn't very much different from the last 10 years of what Bentley was making, basically just like Rolls-Royce's, until the Turbo R came out. This is where they really put some effort into the car. They put a giant Garrett turbo under the hood, actually gave this thing some horsepower, and it was a properly fast, for the time, luxury sedan. I had always wanted one of these ever since I saw Jay Leno's garage video on his that he's owned since new. I guess he traded in a Mercedes 300 SD for one, which is absolutely hilarious. And he talked about how reliable his was. And so I thought, well, a reliable, cool Bentley that's actually fast and luxurious and comfortable. So naturally I want to buy one, and over the years, even before YouTube, I would try to buy one of these, and every single time I was responsible, I would go get a pre-purchase inspection, and they would all be disasters. They would need $10,000 or more worth of work, more than the cars were worth oftentimes, to get back on the road. So I always passed. That is, until I bought a green E63 wagon with over 200,000 miles, and it broke, and it broke, and it broke some more, and broke some more, and I finally got fed up and saw this advertised on Facebook, I think, a guy wanting to trade for any car. I asked if he wanted to trade my E63 wagon, which was probably worth 12 or 13 grand, what I paid for it before all the repairs, and he quickly agreed. And when the car arrived, well, I can see why he would have quickly agreed to it. Now, to give this guy some credit, he did try his best to sell me a somewhat sorted Bentley. He spent thousands on it himself before he sold it to me, and my E63 wasn't exactly perfect. He had to spend some money on some fuel system work, and I think he had a hard time selling it. It was for sale for many, many months. And I think the person who bought the E63 is now trying to quickly sell it because it is equally a disaster. But anyway, this Bentley showed up and, well, it was leaking a lot of things. It was leaking engine oil, it was leaking mineral oil, it was misfiring, the climate control, I believe, wasn't working, or maybe that was the other one. Anyway, a lot of issues, and it took a very, very long time to sort it out. Let me just consult the book the previous owner made that I've made some additions to on the repairs. You know, somebody's really showing off how much they spent on a car when they put it all in a fancy booklet. So anyway, the first round was the mineral oil leaks. There's also a tune-up in there. Let's see. There's basically lots of mineral oil leaks, which on these cars, the mineral oil system runs the suspension and the brakes, and they like to leak from all kinds of places. In addition, the pumps that run these things are actually ran off the engine. They're mechanical, like have little push rods in the V of the engine. Those will leak, and then oil goes everywhere. It's a real big mess. The steering rack was also leaking, power window motors, and then a tune-up. Unfortunately, the tune-up did not fix the misfire on this engine, and it didn't fix all the mineral oil leaks. There were more leaks on the distribution valves. Basically, it went from one place to the next weakest link in the chain somewhere around here, and that leak was fixed, but unfortunately, the misfire was a lot harder to do. I'll pop the hood and I'll show you all the things that were done to this car to try and get it to this point, which is not completely sorted, but as close as basically I'm going to get with this thing. Welcome to hell, or the peak of automotive masochism, in my opinion. A 6.75-liter V8 covered up in this giant mess. So underneath this intake here, which you can see leads to the giant turbo, is those pumps that run the suspension. All this had to come off to reach those things to fix that leak, and then there were other leaks and other suspension issues that needed to be taken care of. But the misfire was the big mystery, and this is why it took so long to fix. It started off thinking, well, maybe it's an ignition thing, because it was actually misfiring a little bit, and that didn't fix it. Next was injectors. The injectors were not firing properly. They were actually messed up, but that did not fix it. Amazingly, this car was still running. It was just running poorly on a lot of systems that were right on the edge. So in addition, there were vacuum leaks, numerous vacuum leaks that can affect the way the car runs. That had to be fixed. And then finally, after doing all of that and still being defeated, is this weird guy that had to be sent off. This is the fuel distributor. This is Bosch electronic or mechanical fuel injection. This needed to be sent off, and it took 4 to 6 weeks to have that rebuilt. Once I got the car back, well, it finally ran well. But at that point, it had been, well, 8-9 months. And the grand total for all of these fixes was $6,000. $6,000 for a year of ownership, and I put 300 miles on it. So how much is that? Is that $20 a mile? And then most of it was driving back and forth from the Wizards because he's 30 miles away. So most of the time I was just driving it to get fixed. But now it's back, and I've been driving around for a week or so trying to justify keeping this thing because, well, I have this Azure now, which is a much nicer car and basically the same in a lot of ways. And I've decided my excuse is, well, I can drive this in the winter and not mess up the nice Bentley, and that's absolutely stupid. But the other reason is I would feel really guilty to sell this to somebody. And if I did sell it no reserve on Cars and Bids, it would take a massive disclaimer. I would tell everybody, you should not buy this car unless you are completely stupid, and then it would sell for, well, no money. Then I wish I would have kept it until something big broke, and then I would park it in my front lawn and have a very fancy looking lawn ornament, a common thing here in Kansas. Realistically though, this Turbo R is probably only worth about $12,000, which is crazy considering it was $200 and something thousand new. You were equally crazy to buy one of these new because the depreciation was totally nuts, but $12,000, so I've spent half of what the car is worth in repairs, and I traded an E63 that I had $17,000 into it. So this is probably one of my dumbest purchases of the past year, most certainly, and nearly of all time for my YouTube channel. I'm trying to think right now, the dumbest one is probably the Russian Bentley. Another Bentley, the Continental GT, but this is a not too far distant second place. So some of you, and certainly quite a few people who are currently being abused by their old Bentleys, would say, well, Tyler, you should have bought a nice one to begin with. You wouldn't have nearly these problems if you had just bought a nice sorted one with a complete service history. And well, this one has a complete service history dating back to 10 years, over $30,000 worth before I got a hold of it, and spent another $6,000 on it. It has 70,000 miles on it, so it was also driven. It didn't sit for a long period of time. And other than what Jay Leno has said on his car, in my experience, all Bentleys are like this. Even this Azure, which is in very nice shape, apparently it was owned by Jean-Claude Van Damme originally, $380,000. So I have the service records right here dating back 10 years, over $60,000. I think $67,000 in repairs before I got a hold of it and spent another about $3,000 on it. Now the soft top on the Azure introduced a whole new can of worms for Bentley ownership. There's 2 repairs on the soft top in the last 10 years, totaling I think $15,000 of that $67,000. But still, between these 2 cars, over $100,000 in repairs in 10 years, over $100,000. That is a new S-Class. That's why you would be absolutely crazy to own one. $100,000 between these 2 cars over a 10-year period. That is just absolutely insane. And despite my best efforts to sort them out, neither of them are fully sorted yet. So I'm going to show you the things that are still wrong with these cars now and try to find any redeeming qualities at all to justify me keeping them. Other tthan the automotive masochism, because surely there's a reason inside my head why I don't want to get rid of them. It's there. I just need to tangibly find why. So the big issue with the Turbo R that's kind of hard to tell on video, but when you see a nice car next to it, it's easy, is the paint quality. The Azure has the original paint mostly. It's very nice. Now look at the Turbo R. It is very faded, tons of imperfections. Basically, this is what you would expect to be a bad quality Mako paint job to be on a Bentley, which is just absolutely nuts. I have not detailed it yet, so it would look a little bit better, but still, the more you clean it, the more imperfections you would see. Interior-wise, it is pretty nice. I mean, some wearing here. The wood is chipping away a little bit on this panel, but otherwise, really nice shape. Very clean in here. Now, mechanically, it does run and drive very well. There's one annoying thing that I'll show you when I take it out for a drive, but the big remaining issue is an oil leak. Yes, this car still leaks oil from the front crank pulley, which when I got the car, it wasn't that bad. It was barely dripping, if at all. But now it leaves a healthy little dribble everywhere I park it overnight. So that's something I will have to take care of in the near future. Now, the Azure is nice, but it does have some cosmetic little dings and things from normal use. The things that remain broken on it are mostly electrical. It tells me things like an alarm has occurred, which the last time an alarm went off was over a month ago, but that message just won't go away. Same with the seatbelt retractors. We replaced them and the light is still on. It won't go away. The check engine light comes and goes, even though the car runs perfectly. But other than that, it runs and drives very nicely. I'll show you under the hood briefly just for immediate comparison. This is the more modern age of that 6.75 liter turbo, but still the big turbo sitting over there. Just a modern ignition and fuel delivery system that simplifies the car quite a bit and gives it a lot more power. Wizard enjoys working on the Azure a lot more than the Turbo R, but the Turbo R is going to be the needy one. But enough negatives, let's try to find positives. And the first positive is, well, it looks good, I suppose. Does it? Does it look good? I am struggling here. It does have a very distinct look. There's no mistaking this for anything but a Bentley or, I guess, a Rolls Royce. It is a handsome, stately, a beefy car, but what else? What else? Anything else, guys? I guess we can drive it. Maybe there's more?
Hi-yo, Silver, away!
No lights, that's right. Oil pressure is pegged, that's broken. All the other gauges working. Okay, when you set off in a Turbo R, you're thinking, oh, this is really nice. And it is. The suspension is hydraulic and super smooth. And despite this thing being 30 years old, it doesn't have a lot of creaks and rattles. It's very quiet and pleasant in here. And that big turbo, well, you can definitely feel it. And it is pretty funny when it kicks in. This was Bentley trying to be sporty, or really trying to survive. The company was in a really bad way until it was eventually bought up by Volkswagen, and despite it trying to be sporty, they still didn't compromise on the luxury at all, which is my #1 complaint with modern luxury cars. They aren't as luxurious, they're more sport sedans. Which, why does every luxury sedan have to be sporty? Now I've said it 100 times, but moving on, other redeeming qualities, I guess the quality, yes, the wood in here is all very nice, the leather is very nice, it smells very pleasant in here. It's a smell you don't get in new cars anymore. There's a lot of dust and spider webs covering up all this beautiful stuff though, but the Wizard did say he was going to pay for a detail. Very nice of him after collecting $6,000 on this car. Other redeeming qualities, I really don't know. All those things I just said about this car are the same things you could say about a 90s Mercedes S-Class, and the cost to keep those going is way more reasonable than this. Still expensive, really high, but way more reasonable in comparison to this. Oh no, we're caught at a stoplight. It tries, it really does. The power is great on this. I don't know. If I keep this, it's just so stupid. It will continue to bleed me money. It needs to go back to the Car Wizard right now to fix the oil leak. And there's also the climate control. Let me switch to the cold right now and you can hear this noise that it makes. Something inside of the dashboard starts screaming at you. All right, shush. So that and well, the oil leak is a very urgent thing. You should go back to the car wizards right now for that, and who knows how long it will sit for. But if I sell it, I kind of feel like I'm transferring a curse to someone else. So the person who would own this car would be absolutely ruined. Even if I gave it to them, they would be absolutely ruined, and I wouldn't give it away. I wouldn't give it away to anybody, because that would be the worst gift ever. So someone would have to buy it, but then if they bought it, they would be immediately upside down within the first year, because they'd have to spend money on repairs. And I know $30,000 in 10 years, maybe if you divide it up by 10 years, well, what is that? $3,000 a year sounds pretty reasonable, but it's accelerating. The problem is it wasn't too bad in that first 3, 4, 5 years, but it's really going downhill as this car ages. All of these seals, all this stuff for the mineral oil suspension, the engine, and then there's the big whammy that hasn't happened on this car or the Azura yet, and that is the head gasket. At some point, the head gasket is going to go on this engine. It's pretty much a given with Bentleys, and it is a massive, massive job. You saw under the hood what these things look like, so imagine taking that all apart and then getting all new parts, which are very expensive on these cars. Thankfully, there's lots of parts availability on these things. Flying Spares and others still makes most of the parts for them, so that's not an issue. It's just really expensive, and then you have to put it all back together. You'd be spending more than the car's worth, and that's just the reality of any 6.75 liter V8 Bentley, up until they very recently quit making the engine. So this car is an absolute disaster. I've owned it a year, and I imagine I'll keep owning it. It's my winter Bentley. It's my outside Bentley. Did I mention this is the dumbest automotive channel in all of YouTube? Thank you for watching.